So, hello, the newcomers. I hope you're not too wasted from yesterday's party. Welcome to the Sandbox to the Sandbox stage. I hope you're enjoying so far. Last day, but not the least. And I want to welcome our next speaker on the stage. He's going to talk about, I think, one of the most disruptive technologies out there right now. And we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's going to be possible with this technology. So we're going to talk about the use cases and opportunities in the blockchain technology. And I think our next speaker has extensive knowledge on the matter. He used to work in a long time ago at companies like Amex and Citigroup. He worked for a while at PayPal, working with developers, with startups, and in the incubator relationships, doing a lot of hackathons. At one point, I'm guessing Robert went like, I need to do my own thing. So he founded, and he's the co-founder and right now the president of what's called the Blockchain University since 2014. And since then, they've educated 350 entrepreneurs and are inspired around 60 projects dealing with blockchain all over the world, including places like Silicon Valley, India, Japan, and among them, one of the most prestigious scientific institutions like MIT Media Lab. So please welcome our next speaker, Robert Schwentker. Big applause.
Hi all, thank you, good morning. I'd like to talk about some of the use cases and opportunities, and then we'll take some questions at the end. My introduction's been given. I was recently, last year was in India, educating a bunch of people at Infosys. They came out with a big platform this April called EdgeVerve, which is their financial system for banks, essentially, on blockchain. And most recently, I've been running some hackathons in Nashville and Brazil. I was in Brussels yesterday at the European IP Observatory. So we were doing an exploratory workshop on intellectual property and blockchain. And at the Media Lab, I ran a cryptocurrency boot camp for 25 scholars, underrepresented, and women. So let's take a look at some of the use cases, and as well as the startup ecosystem, the investment ecosystem, the challenges, and some future aspects. So how is it that we have this open source software sitting on the internet with a market cap of $10 billion, and this thing hasn't been hacked in over 6 or 7 years, since 2009. It was released on Satoshi Nakamoto's network of servers. It's pretty fascinating, the fact that you have on the internet this massive honeypot of value. And it's running on hundreds of thousands of machines. In fact, the total hashing power of these machines is greater than the world's supercomputers combined, times 13,000. So we have a global computer network of machines maintaining this $10 billion worth of value called Bitcoin. So we have this open source software, which is supporting Bitcoin, and underneath it is this technology called blockchain. So you might know a blockchain is an append-only database of transactions. You can look at the blockchain, for instance, if you go to like blockchain.info, you can see the blockchain live at blockchain.info. Dan Moorhead of Pantera Capital explains that Bitcoin is like a missing protocol in the internet stack of protocols. So we all know what HTTP is, we all know what HTTPS is. We figured that out. It took about 10 years to get from the SMTP protocol to Gmail. So it's going to take some time before the internet of value really happens. But it's happened right now through Bitcoin and also Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies. So we're in the beginning stages. We're like at the beginning of building the railroad. So there's opportunities that exist, but they're very difficult because we're in this kind of wild west. So some of the key challenges I see is that there's not a global identity system that we have on the internet as such. It's a pretty primitive kind of thing. So it's difficult, for instance, for banks to do cryptocurrencies. It's hard for them to do things with blockchain because there's not an identity system. So we're seeing banks getting together with government to try to reimagine how we do identity. How do you restore a blockchain? No one's really had to do this yet. So if a blockchain fails, when you restore it, do you sign it? Do you have to replay the transactions and have them re-signed? These are some challenges in this technology. There's a lack of standards right now. It's very early, as I said, so we don't see many standards around types of cryptography. We don't see any standards around identity. How do you use blockchain technologies? In terms of the statutes of limitations, imagine that there was an error with cryptography in a transaction that you made 5 years ago. Well, are you still liable for that transaction? So there's been over 1,000 startups, in fact, been invested in. At the time, over $1.5 billion has been invested. So, in fact, there's been a number of them this year and so forth. This number's gone up somewhat. There's a lot of large financial institutions getting involved in the investment area. And there's a number of new VC firms that have sprung up to invest in blockchain and Bitcoin types of startups. This is from a couple years ago, but a couple things to note here that about 10 or 15 companies have raised 2/3 of this $1.5 billion, including 21, which is kind of, it started out as a hardware company, but they've shifted more to a software platform. There was a 21 computer and such. Coinbase is an exchange. They've raised over $100 million, as is Circle's an exchange. Zappo's a very interesting use case. The founder of Zappo, Wences Casares, grew up in Argentina, where the currency failed 3 times in his lifetime. And so he created Zappo as a kind of a Bitcoin wallet, an exchange. You can buy Bitcoin there. He's now sitting on PayPal's board. And interestingly, on his board is Dee Hock of Visa and John Reed, the ex-CEO and founder of Citigroup, as well as Larry Summers, who was the ex-Treasury Secretary in the Clinton administration. So you have some very powerful people entering in the space and sitting on the boards of these startups. Most of these startups, in fact, are in the Bay Area, including Ripple, which just raised another $55 million. However, earlier this year, investments tended to be outside the US, except for now Ripple has come in. As I said, many financial institutions have gotten into investing in the space. They've also done lots of research. Most banks have a blockchain research team now. There's a number of consortiums. There's over 12 consortiums globally of companies getting together to try to figure out how to use blockchain technologies. Blockchains are typically used between organizations that have semi-trusted relationships. So typically you don't have like an internal blockchain. IBM has an example of an internal blockchain application, but they're generally done between semi-trusted organizations. So banks could do settlement on a blockchain, and rather than maintaining individual ledgers, they can have a shared ledger to do this type of settlement. The largest consortium that we know is R3CEV. They've put together a group of 60 global banks and insurance companies and such, and they're doing a number of proof of concepts and quite a lot of research in the blockchain area. This is a document, this is a page from William Mogayar's book on blockchain technologies. This is about financial services, but you'll see here at the very bottom level, you have the infrastructure and base protocols, which include like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, Stellar, and such, and the miners. And then you have a number of middleware services and APIs and such. But where the greatest opportunity is perhaps are in developing applications on these various platforms. So in terms of use cases, quite a number of them in many areas. So lots of imagination is going on in terms of what blockchain technology can be used for, in terms of IP, as we talked about, digital trading of assets, proof of ownership of things. So one of the remarkable things about blockchain technology is that, for instance, if we use the Bitcoin system as a point of reference, if I send you a Bitcoin, or I send you a portion of a Bitcoin, and I sent it today. Let's say I meant to send you 1 Bitcoin, but I sent you 10 Bitcoins. That transaction cannot be reversed. And we can always look back and see that I sent you 10 Bitcoins. Tomorrow, you might send me some of those Bitcoins back. You wouldn't have to, but it's irreversible. So finally on the internet, we've been able to create a database with irreversible properties, immutable properties. So this is one of the profound things about the blockchain technology. It's also allowed for the emergence of what's called a decentralized organization and or a decentralized application. So Bitcoin is an example of a decentralized organization. Who controls Bitcoin? Well, no central authority does. Many of the maintainers of this Bitcoin network happen to be in China. Many of the software developers for Bitcoin happen to reside at Blockstream, which is a startup in the Bay Area. And oddly, about 1% of the wallet addresses in Bitcoin control over 99% of the Bitcoin. So that's kind of an interesting fact about how some things have become somewhat centralized in the ecosystem. But there is no central authority. There's no one person you could go to or no organization you could go to take Bitcoin down as a system. So it's probably one of the biggest systems that's sitting there on the internet with no central authority. So people are creating organizations that don't have a central authority. So imagine like a ride-sharing company without a central authority. So if I wanted you to drive me somewhere, or vice versa, I could just pay you directly. We could have that transaction, but that could be a system that's sitting on the internet without a central authority. So I think we'll see the emergence of decentralized organizations that resemble things like Facebook, Airbnb, and Uber without a central company. So how will those companies form? We'll look at that a little bit later. So IOTA Token is a very interesting startup that's using blockchain technologies to manage Internet of Things devices. So imagine that you have 1,000 drones going around and doing things. How do they maintain themselves? It turns out that each drone could have a wallet, and that wallet could have money in it. When it flies somewhere and delivers a package, it gets money put into that wallet. When it goes to get recharged or repaired, it pays out of that wallet. So this is a startup that's working with IoT and blockchain. 21, as I mentioned, is the highest funded blockchain type of a company. And initially they were focused on hardware and set-top boxes and having mining chips in these devices. Very recently they've pivoted. This was started by Balaji Srinivasan, who's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Blockstream, as I pointed out, has raised about $74 million. They have about 9 or 10 of the core Bitcoin developers sitting in-house. So they're creating something called side chains. So the idea that you could take the Bitcoin blockchain and instead of forking it and creating a colored coin or an altcoin, you could take the Bitcoin blockchain and create what's called a side chain, which would be mined separately, and it could be permissioned. So the Bitcoin blockchain is permissionless. Anybody can enter into the Bitcoin system as a miner, as a validator, as a user, as an app developer. But you could create permission systems off of the Bitcoin blockchain with side chains. Blockstream hasn't released a production version of this, though they do have testnet services for side chains. Chain is a company also in the Bay Area that's doing asset issuance and such. They're trying to reimagine financial services by creating financial assets on blockchains and using those to transform financial services. Abra is a startup that's been focused mainly on remittance. Abra received investment in part from American Express Ventures. They've raised about $12 million, and they're used to send money cross-border. So what's the beauty? If you've never done a Bitcoin transaction, I highly recommend that as your homework. Create a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet. They're easy to get, and do a transaction with somebody. It's very simple to move money with Bitcoin or other types of cryptocurrencies. So I can send you, interestingly enough, I can send you a penny or I can send you $1 million, and you can be anywhere in the world. You'll receive that within seconds, and you'll be able to spend it potentially within an hour. So I can send you money anywhere in the world, and it'll cost about 10 to 20 cents. That's revolutionary. The fact that you can send money in huge amounts or in microtransactions, and the cost is very small. So other startup opportunities, we should look at public platforms on which one could build. Of course, there's the Bitcoin ecosystem or the Ethereum. These are open source software, so you can just copy them and create your own cryptocurrency. There's over 1,000 cryptocurrencies that have been created mostly with Bitcoin. So people have just copied the open source software, changed parameters in it, and created their own cryptocurrencies. There's a number of private platforms on which one can build things. Ripple is one. They've also created a new protocol called Interledger. And Interledger is used to talk between blockchains. Hyperledger, kind of an interesting conglomerate of software. Digital Asset Holdings is another startup, raised about $60 million. Blythe Masters, who came out of JP Morgan, has created a digital asset holding. She bought a small startup from the Bay Area called Hyperledger. She donated that name to the open source project now called Hyperledger. IBM donated about 45,000 lines of code to Hyperledger, and Intel also contributed about 20,000 lines of code. So it's a big open source effort. It's now sitting at the Linux Foundation. It's one of the most well-known projects for creating blockchain applications. Others are multi-chain. Eris, there's a little error here, that should be Eris. They're now known as Monax. And R3's Corda. So R3 has also come up, not really with what they call a blockchain. They call it a distributed ledger technology. So there is a difference. Blockchain is a form of distributed ledger technology. But there's other things in distributed ledger technology, such as transaction chains, and that are part of this ecosystem, but one to take note of. So again, a blockchain is one form of what they call DLT, or distributed ledger technologies. But there's transaction chains. Open chain is an example of a transaction chain. It's actually a client-server model, whereas most of this is sort of a peer-to-peer model. So interestingly, these cryptocurrencies have really begun to transform venture capital and venture capital investment. So traditionally in venture capital, returns may happen after 10 years. They're typically done by VCs. Many of them are on Sand Hill Road in the Silicon Valley. But one can actually release cryptocurrency as part of your company's stock, if you will. So imagine an initial cryptocurrency offering. A number of companies have done this, and a number of decentralized autonomous organizations have done this. So they release tokens. Bitcoin is one such token. Bitcoin is kind of a user token. There's a company called Steam, which has released a debt token. And others have created like equity tokens. So you can issue tokens, and you can use that as your economy. As people buy those tokens, they're essentially investing in your company. So I spent a small amount of money to invest in Factum, which is using tokens to represent land titles, for instance. Ethereum raised $18 million, so they did a crowd sale. They were selling their Ethereum token. People would invest in Ethereum by investing in Bitcoin. And so Ethereum, in fact, has a cryptocurrency called Ether, and it's now worth $1 billion. Their market cap of Ethereum is $1 billion. They have this platform, which is kind of Bitcoin 2.0. So with Ethereum, you can build what are called decentralized autonomous apps. You can create whole organizations on Ethereum. It's best known for is something called a smart contract. Smart contract is basically a program, typically an open source program, that lives on a blockchain that does something. You could use it for voting. So many use cases are there for these types of smart contracts. So I could say, if the weather in Madrid here goes above 30 degrees, that I will pay you $1,000. If it doesn't go over 30 degrees, you will pay me $1,000. We could do this as a smart contract on this Ethereum platform. However, some kind of crazy things have happened on the Ethereum platform. Someone created a smart contract called the DAO. And again, the DAO, in this case, is Decentralized Autonomous Organization. They were creating a kind of a Kickstarter on Ethereum. And tens of thousands of people around the globe invested in the DAO. And you could invest tiny amounts of money. You could invest $1, $1,000, $1 million. And over a period of a month, $160 million was raised. And there were some software developers out there who were going, hey, there's a bug in that smart contract. You have to be careful. And there were other people saying, hey, you've already raised $1 million, you've already raised $10 million, why don't you stop this smart contract? It looks too smart, if you will. And in fact, after about a month, a hacker came in and they hacked 1/3 of this smart contract. What happened is Ethereum as a currency forked. The Ethereum Foundation said that they were going to change the code and fork the code and have a separate code now called the Ethereum, the main Ethereum chain, which is worth about $1 billion. But there's a separate Ethereum called the Ethereum Classic chain, which now resides, and there's a lot of this money residing on the Classic chain. And it has approximately $100 million of value on it. So Ethereum is now forked. There's two Ethereums. There's two Ethereum code bases. And that was happening because of all this smart contract, interestingly. So it's a very volatile ecosystem, very exciting ecosystem. Another example is Economy. They've raised $10 million in a crowd sale. And they did it through people investing into this Economy, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Lisk, and actually fiat currencies. And over 3,500 investors were there. So what they're trying to do is create an index and a fund management platform of cryptocurrencies. Steam is a social media platform. Imagine you get paid for putting photos on Facebook. That's pretty interesting. I'm an advisor to another company called Yours.network. They're doing a similar type of thing where you get paid for your content. So Steam actually raised quite a lot of money in their initial crowd sale. It was approximately some $20 or $30 million initially. It went to around $400 million, and now it's kind of come back down. I think their market cap is $65 million. But I'm saying market cap here. So these people did a crowd sale. They sold stock or coin in their company, which was released on a blockchain. So anybody could participate. And they create a circular economy because these Steam tokens are used kind of as a debt token on the Steam platform. So it's a whole new paradigm of venture capital, a different types of business model that's here. So just looking into the future a little bit, I see that blockchain will kind of, as a term, will kind of buried into kind of internet protocols. We won't be talking a lot more about blockchain over the next couple of years. We'll start to talk more about distributed ledger technology, I think. Very interestingly, the governments will start to issue cryptocurrencies. So what can happen with cryptocurrencies? For settlements, remittance, those sorts of things can happen in a much smoother way with less friction. But you can also start to do microtransactions. So someone comes to your website, if you have a website, and they can pay a half a penny to see a page. If they scroll down, they have to pay another half penny. They scroll down. You couldn't do these types of things before with traditional fiat currencies, but you can do it with digital cryptocurrencies. Barbados has released a token that's tied to the Bitcoin token. And so they're using it for international settlement. So smaller countries are creating cryptocurrencies which allow them to kind of bypass the traditional banking systems. Bank of England is looking at issuing sterling on the blockchain. The US Federal Reserve is looking at what they're calling Fed coin, creating a federal coin as a cryptocurrency. As I mentioned, Internet of Things will start to adopt cryptocurrencies in a big way. And intellectual property will be secured on blockchains and such. So we've got $1 billion in venture capital, $1.5 billion has been invested into hundreds of startups. 50 of the world's largest banks have joined the R3 consortium, along with some other insurance companies and such. And we're creating blockchain types of applications that are disrupting many industries. So with that, I'll take some questions.
Hello. You started your presentation talking about computing capacity. Who owns these computers? The miners? And who are the miners? Which is the profile of the miners?
So the question is about who owns the total sum of the computers running the Bitcoin network is greater than the world's supercomputers times 13,000. They're anonymous actors by and large. They're in fact mining pools. They're owned by individuals globally. Many of them are in China. So it's estimated that over 70% of the Bitcoin miners are located in China. But anybody can enter into the system. It used to be that you could mine with just a laptop and your CPU. Then you had to move to a graphical user interface, a GPU. And then now there's a special ASIC chip, ASIC chip that's used for mining. But anybody can enter into the system. Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Morning.
What are the most powerful use cases that you see in blockchain for charities?
For
charities.
the most useful blockchain types of applications for charities right now, today? It's a good question. What I've seen most is kind of creating fundraising for charities. It doesn't seem to have worked out so well. We're in such an infancy in this kind of technology. There has Mike Hearn, who came from Google, and I think he's now at R3, if I recall correctly, created something called Lighthouse, which is a kind of a Kickstarter for fundraising and such. That's an open source project, Lighthouse. So people have been forking that and using that for charities. But I think fundraising is what I've seen most charities done. In terms of what I think the most useful use case for charities, again, I think it's probably around the fundraising. So when you get to Ethereum smart contracts, many things can potentially be there, but it's so early in the Ethereum ecosystem, and things are just kind of exploding here and there that it'll take a couple more years before that system becomes very stable, I think. So, thank you for the question. I think there's a lady.
Thanks. I have two questions. The first one is the blockchain is supposed to be secured by design, but today there are still some security problems on the endpoints, especially. So where do you think we need to act to really make the blockchain completely secure from end to end?
8 points, what did you say?
Yeah, I mean, today there are hacks. The blockchain is not secured, and especially at the end points of the blockchain, like people who need to enter the network.
Sure.
So what do you see are the main priorities today to make the blockchain secured from end to end?
Okay, and your other question?
And my other question is on the use cases. What, in your opinion, is the good recipe where there's a real business case for the blockchain? Because, for instance, there's a lot of use cases where it's only about optimization, and there are simpler solutions. For instance, managing the IoT, we can do that without the blockchain, or using time stamping solutions, for instance. So yeah.
So in terms of the security end-to-end, the blockchain itself has never been significantly hacked. What you see are hacks at the endpoints, as you said, the on-roads and off-ramps. So Bitfinex is a cryptocurrency exchange which was hacked for $80 million a couple of years ago. Mt. Gox was hacked for $400 million in 2013. So cryptocurrency exchanges typically hold people's private keys, and there's sort of the system administration around that has become weakened, and there's social hacks and such. So in those cases, it's not really blockchain technology that's insecure. It's typical computer administration processes that are insecure and such. So the blockchain technology is completely secure, as that we've seen. Like I said, over $10 billion is sitting there on the open internet. You can look at the transactions as they happen second by second. The transactions themselves are not encrypted. They use cryptography, but they're not encrypted. You can see the value going from one person to another, whether it's 10 cents or $10 million. So blockchain technology is extremely secure. It's how you apply that. So we could take the example of fiat currency, right? So fiat currency, if I leave $50 right there, well, that's not the feature of the currency. It was the stupidity of myself just leaving it there and walking away. Someone takes away with it. So that's not the fiat currency that's insecure itself. It's just as it's applied in the case of the exchanges. In terms of the use cases, I know we're out of time here, but use cases, I'm sorry, a little bit about your question was?
What is the good recipe where there's a real business case for the blockchain?
So, like I said, there's been hundreds of startups that have tried, and many are failing. I think as the Ethereum grows out, I think there will be many interesting kind of use cases there. But interesting recipes, I think that's up for us startups and entrepreneurs to figure out. Time stamping, I think, as you pointed out, is a very powerful sorts of thing. So Dan Taylor is the photographer here, was talking about that, and how you can secure intellectual property assets, such as photographs, on a blockchain. I think time stamping them and putting them on a blockchain is a fantastic use case.
Okay, well, we're out of time. So
I'll be around if people have questions.
I know, but we need to keep
I
going.
mean on the side, or on the back.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
if you want, he's going to be around, so he can get your questions. Robert, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge. Please, big applause for Robert.
Thank you all. Thank you.